This is The Space Shot, episode 321 for March 31st, 2018. Sir Isaac Newton. I'm John Molnix. I've got some news updates before we get to some history today. Tianyang-1 should be re-entering Earth's atmosphere on April 1st, give or take a few hours. No, this isn't an April Fool's joke. The station is actually going to burn up in the atmosphere on April Fool's Day. We shouldn't have to worry about debris hitting anybody. The chances of that happening are quite small. On Monday, April 2nd, a SpaceX Falcon 9 rocket is slated to launch a Dragon spacecraft to the International Space Station as part of the CRS-14 mission. In mid-April, there'll be an Atlas V rocket and a Falcon 9 lifting off, followed by another launch later in the month. On May 5th, an Atlas V rocket will send the InSight lander to Mars, where it will land at Elysium Planitia in November of this year. I'll have more on that mission as we approach the launch date. Now, for some history and science. On March 31st, 1727, Sir Isaac Newton passed away at the age of 84. Newton is known for his three laws of motion and his law of universal gravitation. The story of an apple falling on his head may not be entirely accurate.
But then I said, in that frame of reference, the perihelion of Mercury would have precessed in the opposite direction.
That is a great story.
Quite amusing, Dr. Hawking. You see, Sir Isaac, the joke depends on an understanding of the relativistic curvature of space-time. If two non-inertial reference frames are in relative motion...
Do not patronize me, sir. I invented physics. The day that apple fell on my head was the most momentous day in the history of science.
Not the apple story again.
That story is generally considered to be apocryphal.
What? How dare you?
Perhaps we should return to the game.
Now let's see, where were we? Yes, you raised Mr. Data 4.
Which means that the bet is 7 to me?
The bet is 10. Can't you do simple arithmetic? I don't even know why I'm here in the first place. What is the point of playing this ridiculous game?
When I play poker with my shipmates, it often appears to be a useful forum for exploring the different facets of humanity. I was curious to see how three of history's greatest minds would interact in this setting. So far, it has proved to be most illuminating.
And profitably.
That clip was from the opening scene of the Star Trek The Next Generation Season 6 finale, Descent Part 1. Commander Data played poker with holodeck representations of Stephen Hawking, who guest starred in that episode, Albert Einstein, and Sir Isaac Newton. I always found this scene to be amusing, and I figured I'd share it here with all of you since we're talking about Newton today, and since we just lost Professor Hawking. Let's talk about Newton's three laws first up, and then we'll get back to the story of the apple. Newton's three laws of motion were published in 1687 in his seminal work known as the Principia, and they are, quote, every body continues in a state of rest or of uniform motion in a straight line unless it is compelled to change that state by forces impressed on it. 2. The change of motion is proportional to the force impressed and is made in the direction of the straight line in which that force is impressed. More simply, force equals mass times acceleration, or F equals ma. And third, to every action, there is always an equal and opposite reaction, or the mutual attractions of two bodies upon each other are always equal and act in opposite directions. The reason I'm mentioning Newton's three laws here today is because they're directly related to spaceflight. For instance, Newtonian physics help explain how rockets function. Newton's third law, for every action there's an equal and opposite reaction, is how rockets operate. A rocket has thrust because when fuel and oxidizer combust, they create a reaction that exits through a rocket nozzle, pushing the launch vehicle in the direction opposite of that thrust. Newton's other laws are just as important to space and atmospheric flight as the third. According to a NASA article, quote, since spacecraft velocities do not approach a significant fraction of the speed of light, Newtonian physics serves well for operating and navigating throughout the solar system. That said, navigational aids such as the Fleet of Global Positioning System (GPS) spacecraft do require special relativity calculations in order to provide accurate position determination. If we ever figure out how to travel at speeds approaching c, the speed of light, we'll have to switch to Einstein. Relativistic travel and time dilation are topics for another podcast episode I'll be doing in the future, so don't think that we won't return to those. Now, back to the Apple. NASA has a great page on the science of orbital mechanics that I'm linking to in the show notes. I want to read an excerpt from this site here because it captures the essence of Newton's law of universal gravitation, supposedly inspired by the apple falling on his head. Quote, within the pages of Principia, Newton also presented his law of universal gravitation as a case study of his laws of motion. All matter exerts a force, which he called gravity, that pulls all other matter towards its center. The strength of the force depends on the mass of the object. The sun has more gravity than Earth, which in turn has more gravity than an apple. Also, the force weakens with distance. Objects far from the sun won't be influenced by its gravity. Even though this was written hundreds of years ago, it's incredible how Copernicus, Kepler, Newton, and many others were able to contribute so much to modern science. Their legacy continues to live on as we push out into the solar system, and I wonder what they would have thought had they seen the spacecraft we're operating today. Educators, there's a lot of links in the show notes, so be sure to give them a read. I hope all of you have a fantastic rest of your day. I appreciate each and every one of you that listen to the podcast every day. Since you're here and I've got your ear, give me 30 seconds of your time. I'd be incredibly grateful if you could share the podcast with your friends and family. Tag one of them and let them know about your favorite episode. I'd also really appreciate it if you could venture into the Apple Podcasts app or your podcast app of choice and leave a review for The Space Shot. A steady stream of reviews helps ensure The Space Shot is more visible in the Apple Podcasts app. As always, the show notes have more information on today's episode. You can hit me up on Instagram and Twitter. Find me at John Molnix. I'm always up to chat. You can also connect with me on Facebook. Just search The Space Shot or check out the links in the show notes and you'll find me. I'm John Molnix, and I'll catch you on the flip side.